Thank you. Is this, sorry. Thank you for holding the meeting today. I would just ask for more consideration for this. I've received.
Can I get your name for the record?
I'm sorry, Livy Wild. Thank you for holding the meeting today. I know this was called rather suddenly. There's just a lot of unnecessary death happening over in Gaza, and I acknowledge that there's a lot of political pressure on that right now, but we as citizens it's our duty to stop that unnecessary bloodshed wherever possible. Thank you.
Next we have Amber Rose.
Thank you. Amber Rose Nolan. It is AMBEROSE. So, hello everyone. This is the third time that I'm speaking on this, so I don't want to be redundant with what I'm actually saying. So I'm trying to talk specifically to the EDI committee here and to talk about the impact, what we've actually done, and what we're attempting to push forward now. Throughout this entire time that we've been working on this resolution, we have been told that we need to keep everything as local as possible and talk about personal impacts. I feel like if you go back, if you haven't already listened to public comment, there's a lot of information already there. For me, it's interesting to see what's going on here as a person who's been working in DEI for over a decade now professionally. To actually be in front of you speaking about this particular thing. It's also interesting because when it comes to personal impacts, I have been attempting to look, find, get a position inside of DEI in the Lansing area. However, everything that is happening inside of Gaza right now is taking up so much of my time. In the last times where I've made public comment, I have spent hours trying to be as poignant and have as much information as possible delved in for those 3 minutes. And with that, all of that has taken time away from actually being able to go forward and even apply for a job. When it comes to all of that, it becomes more difficult for me to function, trying to figure out how to actually speak with also being heard. And it's one of those areas where I am hoping that the EDI committee is one that understands how much this is an issue of humanity in general, how much it is about the Palestinian citizens who are living in Lansing right now, but also about every single one of the citizens that are here. I know that I talked already about the National Institute of Health, or National Institute of Mental Health, how it's affecting children, how we have documentation already on the impact of war when it actually comes to any person. And I'm hoping these are things that, again, you can keep in mind for this particular resolution. Now, the next area that I have is to address a comment that I had heard previously in the EDI committee, which was talking about changing the resolution in and of itself, particularly in the conversation talking about Hamas. I want to point out that when it comes to this, again, I say, we're in Lansing, we were told to keep everything local. All of our comments have been very much on that particular stage, and we would be speaking differently and having different points for all of you if we were asked something different to actually change that resolution. Thank you.
So I'd just like to address Luna Brown, she, her. Basically just gonna address, like, a lot of the stuff has already been talked about. We had a meeting last week, a couple dozen people were there. Of those people that were there were 2 people in total that spoke out against a resolution for ceasefire. And they weren't against a resolution for ceasefire. They were just clarifying that they wanted to make sure that blame was placed on Hamas. While I understand their position, I don't agree with it. That would be like, say, blaming the Stonewall rioters for the violence caused against them by police afterwards. It doesn't make any sense. When they were being attacked for, like, as long as any of us have been alive, they've been being attacked. So trying to blame Hamas in this, and yes, what Hamas did was atrocious, but trying to blame Hamas as being the cause of all this is disingenuous. They haven't even been around longer than a few decades, and this has been going on for over 70 years now. So I think it's pretty clear that people are in favor of a resolution, and the only objections to it specifically are because they want to place blame on Gaza, which I think most of us here do not believe. That's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Luna. Vivian?
Hello, my name is Vivian Breslin. I just want to bring a couple points of information for you to understand just the severity of this and the systematic nature of the violence that has been happening here. There have been internal documents released from the Israeli government that showed that they were quite excited for Hamas to be democratically elected back several decades ago, because then they could treat the people of Gaza as aggratory, like they could be more aggressive against them. And on October 7th, they had their chance to go into full-out elimination. Very recently, I think about a week ago, there was footage that came out that IDF soldiers entered into a hospital dressed as doctors and patients, and then proceeded to kill 3 people, one of whom was a Hamas member, however, was in bed, paralyzed from the waist down. The only reason that these are not considered breakages of the Geneva Convention and war crimes is because Hamas is not recognized as a separate entity. But the IDF has just shown that they have been, and they have been for a while, willing to commit war crimes for this offensive. So this ceasefire is very necessary because the organization that is perpetuating them does not care and is making a power move.
Thank you. Mr. Sadar?
Good afternoon, Tahsin Sardar. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for arranging the special meeting and to listening to your constituents who wrote to you all. Appreciate it truly. About 57 cities have already passed the ceasefire resolution, and I believe Lansing is very late to the game. So I implore you to kindly consider this seriously, and I hope you will adopt this resolution. We should now be in the phase of implementing divestment from companies that are indulging in war in Israel, as well as imposing sanctions on companies and businesses that deal with them, because this is what the ICJ ruling calls for. We should now be in that phase. There are some countries such as Japan that have already started such procedures. If you go back to how we tackled apartheid in South Africa, this is how it began locally. Close to home, actually, Michigan State University was a pioneer in this action. So this is the phase we should be in. The first ceasefire resolution from a city was passed way back in October. So I hope you will consider this seriously. With every passing day, scores of lives are being lost. Yesterday, 137 civilians were killed in Gaza. Despite the ICJ ruling, Israel is just not abiding by the directive to avoid civilian casualties. And the Biden administration is playing purely a political game here, not listening to its constituents. So it is incumbent upon us at local level to act upon it. So I'd like to urge you for the consideration. Thank you.
So we have one more speaker that's signed up, well, at least 2 more, and I know people came late, so I'm going to put this second sheet here pass it around, and we'll just give everybody about 3 more minutes who still wants to speak to sign up, and then we'll go from there. Next speaker, Emily.
Emily Malkowski. I am annoyed to be here. This resolution should have been passed in the first place. It never should have gone to DEI. It's a community-drafted ceasefire. A majority of people from your community who came to speak on this issue expressed support for the ceasefire. There was a handful of old men at the last DEI meeting who didn't want it passed, but there was roughly 40 people there. So look at those numbers and make it make sense to me why we're listening to a few people when a majority of people want this ceasefire passed. I will say again, it is a community-drafted ceasefire with a majority of support from your community. You are elected representatives, you are elected officials. Your job is to represent the people who elected you. And a majority of them want a ceasefire to be passed. So let's get that done.
Thank you. Mary?
Hello, my name is Mary Knesny. I appreciate your time. I once was a recording secretary for the Board of Commissioners, so I definitely understand what you are going through right now. I want to say that I'm very thankful to have been able to walk from my neighborhood on the west side of Lansing over to this meeting. I just want to say that Lansing should pass this resolution not only to stand against genocide, but to stand with other cities in Michigan, specifically Dearborn, who has been slandered recently. That is all.
Thank you, Mary. Peter?
Hi, Peter Fowler. I'm from the 4th Ward, Old Oakland neighborhood. I appreciate council calling this special session. I want to reiterate what's already been said by a lot of your constituents, that we need a ceasefire passed in the city. I also appreciate what's been said about going further than a ceasefire. I think divestment from Israeli companies that are complicit with this is warranted, and hopefully we can work together to pursue something along those lines in the future as well. So urging the committee here to bring this back to council so we can actually pass this, hoping you all make the right decision here. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
I, like everybody else here, am deeply disappointed and ashamed in Lansing in this moment in history. We all know that complicity in this moment will make you all a villain when we look back at what we were willing to do when it mattered most.
I saw yours on there.
Countless war crimes, bombs, families decimated, children holding onto the limbs of lost siblings, the countless cries of mothers and fathers we have seen, are heard and still hear echoing in all our hearts and minds. We're haunted by the direct role that the colonial empire that is the United States is holding and funding and arming these atrocities. This is a clear and systematic genocide intended to displace and annihilate an entire people for the resources of their land. There's a clear goal in separating these people not from the very lives and their families and that land, but from their culture. This is, in no unclear terms, a genocide. And it's happening in the most densely packed city in the world. It is truly a ghetto, and we are witnessing its uprising and labeling it terrorism, instead of recognizing the 75 years of colonial violence that has been happening there, that we have played a part in every single year. So it saddens me deeply that the City Council of Lansing felt a need to outsource morality to a separate committee. And I really hope that you are able to do what the council has refused to do. We blew past 100 days weeks ago. This has been ongoing and it's not stopping, and every single hint of a ceasefire that we see coming from Israel is violated and undermined, and more atrocities are piled on top of that. So we have a moral obligation, rather you have a moral obligation, to not be a moral failure in this moment, for human rights everywhere and for the Arab and Palestinian community in our city and across the state, and for the well-being of all of our souls and the survival of our very humanity.
Thank you. And I realize there's a third sheet out there. Is it still being circulated? And if it is, could someone bring it up? We have a few more people on this second sheet here. Owen.
Hi, Owen Handy, First Ward. I'm here in support of the ceasefire resolution because it's extremely important that we at least do something. And the ceasefire is a very important first step, but it's only a first step. We have to put any pressure we possibly can at this level to stop what is going on out there, because it is our dollars that are buying the bombs that are blowing up 80% of the housing in Gaza. Does anybody here actually think 80% of the people in Gaza are Hamas? Anybody? Okay? That's not how this works. It's essentially a political party, and you have to worry about where you live in case there's what, a Republican in your apartment building? You got to worry about dying because of that? It ain't right. It hasn't been right since 1948. It wasn't right in the 60s when the borders were expanded. It wasn't right in 2005 when an Israeli general said the quiet part out loud when he talked about targeting civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and police departments in order to punish the Palestinian people in Gaza. If this were all about Hamas, Israel wouldn't be attacking places in the West Bank right now. If this were all about Hamas, they wouldn't be bombing Lebanon. They wouldn't be bombing Syria. We wouldn't be bombing the Houthis in Yemen. This isn't about Hamas. This is about getting every single Palestinian out of the Levant, because Israel, the state of Israel, and specifically Netanyahu and Likud, Noam, and the entire coalition of that government wants Arab Palestinians out of that region. It doesn't matter that Gaza itself wasn't even part of ancient Israel. It wasn't. Look at the old maps. It was the Philistine states. This is all based on bias and lies in order to perpetuate colonialism. And they're targeting civilians. I don't care if Hamas has tunnels underneath a hospital or a school. Don't bomb a hospital or a school. Why is it okay for a modern government to bomb civilian areas, whether it's Israel or the United States? One of the reasons that Israel went up and was like, hey, if you, in front of the ICJ and said, hey, if you find this to be genocide, then you're going to have to look back at Iraq. We probably should look back at Iraq and Afghanistan and what we did and what we're continuing to do through our proxy in Israel.
Thank you, Owen. Nigel?
Thank you very much. I'm Nigel Paneth. I'm an old man, as has been pointed out already. I'm also a Jew, and I have very strong ties to the Jewish people and to the people of Israel, which I'll talk about in a moment. But first, let me say this. The ongoing violence in Israel and Gaza should stop. And calling for a ceasefire is one way to do this. However, it's critical to remember that a ceasefire must be binding on both sides in a conflict. The present resolution, in my view, is very close to being balanced, nonpartisan, and free of any attempt to seek political advantage. What I hope we can craft here is a moral statement that respects the views and feelings of all citizens in the Lansing area. So I suggest 2 amendments to the current draft. 1, the whereas statement in paragraph 5 should acknowledge the reality that even if insufficient, supplies including food and fuel are in fact entering Gaza. Thus I suggest the following wording. Whereas, in spite of supplies entering from both Egypt and Israel, Gaza still lacks basic life necessities, and many Palestinians have been displaced, resulting in starvation and ongoing crisis. Secondly, while it's certainly true that Gaza is under assault, I'm not denying that, it's also true that Israel is the recipient of incessant rocket fire coming from Hezbollah in Lebanon, and even from Hamas Islamic Jihad to this day in Gaza, leading to deaths and to the mass displacement of Israeli civilians. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have had to move from close to border areas. It's also true this war began when Hamas and Islam, this particular war, when Hamas and Islamic Jihad murdered 1,000 innocent Israelis, both Jewish and Arab, including children, babies, and whole families. So I propose one more whereas paragraph to follow the one above. Whereas Israel has been subject to the murder of many civilians, both Jewish and Arab, and continues to receive ongoing rocket fire aimed at civilian centers. So that would be another whereas to justify the ceasefire. Now I'll talk personally because personal impact was mentioned. Many of my family members were slaughtered in the Holocaust by the Nazis. Many of my family members, siblings of those people, were not. And why? Because they moved to the British Mandate of Palestine. I have relatives from Hungary and Central Europe, but I also have relatives through marriage who escaped persecution in Iraq, in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia. Right now, half of the population or more of Israeli Jewish people are of Asian and African origin. The fantasy that this is a European implant is not true. And by the way, Gaza has not had a single Jew inside it, living, since 2005, when Israel withdrew. Israel has made no claim to Gaza, ever.
Thank you, Nigel. Nick Finch.
Hi, thanks for moving up this meeting. I know that we're all tired of hearing about this. We're all tired about seeing this. But every time we come before you, the numbers are up. The numbers of people who have been murdered, the numbers of families who have been torn apart, the number of children who have had body parts cut off with no anesthesia because they've been victims of ongoing state-sanctioned violence. So right now, we're almost up to 12,000 Palestinian children killed. We have well over 500,000 people in a starvation state right now because of a lack of food resources. And I personally just experienced so much fatigue, emotional burnout from the cognitive dissonance that we have to live our normal lives every day here in Lansing, Michigan, go about our business while our humanity is being torn away as we either witness or make effort to turn away from these ongoing atrocities. And it is exhausting to deny other people's humanity by turning away from genocide. It is exhausting to deny my own humanity by acting like I'm not complicit or like I'm not affected by this. This is happening now. The only part of government that we have control over is our local government. This is how it's always been since globalization, is that we make these movements from the bottom up. Right now, we're still stuck in city council in Lansing, which is surprising because we're a really diverse city that really tends to be trying to support victims of war and other atrocities nationwide. And so I just urge us to move on to the next step, right? Join the large number of cities in the US who have signed on for a ceasefire resolution so that we can bring it up to the next level. And our money is still going to support the state of Israel. The US is still utilizing oppressive technologies from the military there in our own local law enforcements. And all of this is connected, and I just urge us to try to move the ball to the next thing, to do the little that we can do to make a difference and stop the violence and be able to live in harmony with all of humanity and our own sense of justice as we have to wake up every day and eat breakfast and go to work. So please pass the resolution so that we can go on to the next.
Thank you, Nick. Mercury?
Hi. I've been a Lansing resident since 2015, and I chose to live in this city. Like, it was an active choice. I said, I'm going to stay here. I like it. I like the people. I think this is going to be my home. And I feel pretty ashamed to call it my city right now because it's taken so long for us to even get to like this meeting that we keep having to wait and push it back. And there's so much pushback to do something that seems so simple. To be on the side of saying, what if we stopped building, like supporting bombing civilians? What if our money stopped going there? What if we just said with our words, hey, that's not cool anymore, as a city, as a collective, because it is bottom up, right? Like, as a global citizen, all I can do is come here and talk to you. And that seems like barely enough. Not enough is what it seems like, and what it is not enough, and yet we're stuck here. It's frustrating. I'm frustrated. I'd rather be putting my time in elsewhere, doing something more different, not moving appointments to come to this meeting for a thing that we've been asking for with majority support for months. So I don't have like nice, elegant words or more statistics to share with you because I know they've already been said, and I'm here to say, please support the resolution for ceasefire so that we as a city can stand up and say, hey, we care about people. As a city, we care about stopping violence and ending it, and we don't want our money and we don't want our government supporting this.
Thank you. Hannah?
Hello. So first I wanted to say that aid trucks are getting into Gaza, but it is insufficient, and now Israel is running a campaign to remove UNRWA with unsubstantiated claims of 0.04% of employees accused of working with Hamas. So I just wanted to say that. I would like to see a demand for ending government funding in the resolution, but honestly, I would just like for one to pass so we can move on. A ceasefire resolution coming from Michigan's capital city will show our solidarity not just for Palestine and all the innocent lives lost, including Israeli civilians, but to our Arab neighbors who live with us in our community, especially Dearborn with the WSJ article published recently, incredibly racist and is going to cause violence. Palestinian liberation is our liberation. I know not everyone is brave enough to see the images coming out of Gaza, but it is decimated. There's nothing more to be taken from them. Gazans have evacuated 5, 6, 9 times in 4 months. People are putting their loved ones' broken bodies in plastic bags. They have run out of body bags. Increasingly disturbing images keep coming out of IDF social channels showing abuse and torture. Israeli protesters are blocking aid trucks, and they are now being bombed. Enough is enough. We have to be leaders for our people, all of our people. History will hold us accountable if we are unable to do it ourselves.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Hi there. Firstly, I just want to say it's really disgusting to see people smile when genocide's talked about. I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of us have. And the Oxford Dictionary defines as genocide as the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group, with the aim of destroying that nation or group. It is particularly clear that this is exactly what Israel is doing to Palestine. It is imperative that we take immediate action to end this ethnic cleansing. That is why we as your constituents are gathered here today to ask you, our elected officials, to use your power to pass a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hersham? Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Hi. So I urge the Council to pass a resolution for ceasefire, and I actually demand stopping funding this genocide. And as was elaborated, it is a clear textbook definition of a genocide. There have been more than 100,000 people, Palestinians in Gaza, who either were killed or under the rubble or injured, which relative to the population of the United States, we can say that's about 15 million. Can you imagine if 15 million out of the 340 million Americans were either killed or injured or displaced? Of course, the displacement is about 70%, which means like probably 200 millions of Americans being displaced. If this is not considered genocide, and if this is not ethnic cleansing, what it is? The other thing, there are lots of propaganda and lies that unfortunately, there were lots of hypocrisy to accept these propaganda for a long time, and this is the time to stop it once and for all. The war did not start on October 7th. It has been more than 75 years of illegal occupation based on all the resolutions of the United Nations and the human rights. And it is the time to say enough is enough for that. And it's actually disgusting to see even ongoing lies. Oh, there is food and electricity and water going on. They are treating them as animals. These are the statements by their officials saying these people are animals. And we're still trying to give the excuse, no, there's still some food and water coming to these people. That's unacceptable for us as humans to be witness, and not even witness, to support. Our tax dollars go to support this genocide. It is not acceptable, and we should say no for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Quentin?
Hi, my name is Quentin, spelled Quintyn. I feel that just the fact that this resolution was sent to the Committee for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the first place feels like a cop-out, because this isn't just about diversity, this isn't just about inclusion. I feel like it was sent here because this is happening to black and brown bodies. This is happening to black and brown people. It's black and brown children being killed. And it shouldn't have been sent here at all. It should have been the main thing on the docket. A ceasefire is the bare minimum of what we can call for as just constituents of one state in the US. It's what should have been called for in the first place, and should have been the first step to an end of occupation and an end of this genocide at all. So I call for a ceasefire resolution.
Thank you, Quentin. Bill?
Well, my heart has already been spoken by a woman here, and the facts seem to be pretty clear from other talks, other people talking. But I'm really wondering where your hearts are at. And thank you for explaining why it's been brought here. I kept wondering, why is DEI doing this? Makes no sense. I do think we need to listen. Put a sentence in there that shows that Hamas did something, but I think by international law, they did nothing wrong. They're not a terrorist group. They were defending their land and their people. I don't agree with it, but I would never pick up a gun or a rock or swing my arm at somebody. I don't believe in it. But where are your hearts at? Can you tell? Are you not allowed to talk to us about what? I see 5 people here, and I'm wondering, do they care? I think you do. I think you're listening. But where are your hearts at? Do you see the images of children with blood all over them? Do you, when you're driving through downtown, do you imagine those buildings being bombed because of what someone else did? Someone that people bombing them supported monetarily to get them voted in 50 years ago? Einstein was against the Zionist movement because of the direction it was taking. He was a Zionist. He saw the leaders taking a different direction, and he warned us. And we know this has been going on. And if you don't know the facts, that's scary. If you're here listening to us and you don't. Do you? I mean, are you allowed to answer me?
We'll be able to talk and deliberate after public comment, and I will talk.
And we'll hear you.
Yeah, we'll talk right here and vote and discuss. And you were the last speaker, so you can finish your time.
Well, thank you very much. And, please remember that your whole body has the thinking cells, including your heart. And if you don't, we're doomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And that was the last person signed up for public comment. Sure.
Please hear from another Palestinian. If they want to speak, please.
I'll tell you what, if there's anybody who came late and didn't sign up and wants to speak, you can come and make comments and try to keep them in the time.
I actually don't know how much time I have, so feel free to interrupt me.
Can I get your name for the record since you didn't sign in?
Tarek, T-A-R-E-K.
Last name?
Al-Zughbi, A-L-Z-O-U-G-H-B-I.
3 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm not sure what needs to be said. I find myself in an awkward position as a Palestinian American. My tax dollars go to fund the killing and genocide of my people. And I'm also in the position where I am a full American in the United States, but with the US's quote-unquote greatest ally in the Middle East, my US status is not recognized and has not been recognized. We don't know what the new agreement between Biden's administration and the Israeli authorities will bring. But I grew up with an American mother with no Palestinian citizenship, who for 32 years of marriage to my Palestinian father did not have the right to live with us in Palestine, having to rely on visas. And now I'm here in the States while the people of Gaza are being genocided, and while the Palestinians are often put in the position where they are blamed for their own resistance to settler colonial occupation. When we talk about the statistics, the facts, it's clear. When we look at the ICJ court decision, when we look at the federal court decision in the US, whether it's using words such as plausible or whether it's using words such as likely committing acts of genocide and asking Israel to limit its force so that it isn't guilty of committing genocide, the facts are clear. A Norwegian institution found that from when the war started until October 26th, the largest demographic that was killed were 5-year-old children in Gaza. Again, just so that we understand that 5-year-old children was the largest single demographic killed. The larger demographic was children. And we currently still live in a place and in a time where we are debating whether this is genocide. I came to the meeting a few weeks ago where we heard from various parties. And even though I disagree with this, one of the things that some voices on the other side said is that their government was calling for a ceasefire from the beginning, which I reject and which I disagree with. But if that is true, then there is no reason that we shouldn't call for a ceasefire now. And I think we live in the 21st century where we should have the knowledge that allows us to know that war isn't the answer, that there are other solutions. And so I call upon this body to respect its constituents' desires and call for a genocide, call for the immediate end of the occupation, and end our complicity, including through funding, to the Israeli occupation. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Now, committee, before we open it up and talk, I just want to put a little background in and to answer some of people's questions about everything. Yes, we all have hearts, and yes, it does seem like, for me, it's a long time for hearing and knowing that this is going on, the war, and I put air quotes around war because like many people, there's different definitions, and I get the news, I watch the news, I have a family just like you all do, with the exception of the few people who have, immediate on-the-ground contacts. We all are seeing the same devastation and sadness. So I brought this to this committee because I'm the chair of this committee, and I wanted a space for us to be able to talk about it. And I guess I could have thought to bring it to Cal, but we had this whole month of no committee meetings, but basically an opportunity. So I decided to bring it here because I thought it would be a good place for a discussion and to be able to, talk about the language and the drafts. And if it passes, or if a draft passes, then it will be brought to the entire council. And originally, I can speak for myself, I didn't necessarily see this conflict as a City of Lansing matter, so I was very hesitant to, in my official capacity, talk about it, other than conversations with my family, my wife and stuff, and friends about what's going on. I didn't really see this as a Lansing matter because we have our, charter constitution and our duties and responsibilities, and nowhere on there did I think at first where international law or, whether the United States government funds Israel and all of those conversations that's been had for a long time, and how many, and I know we're talking about contemporary 1948, but I believe it goes beyond that. So there's many hundreds of years, at least decades of conflict where our top U.S. officials, whose job under the Constitution is to be the sole people responsible for foreign affairs, which is essentially when United States or City of Lansing talks about doing things, it seems it's in that realm. However, after so many people coming to speak and explaining, and especially, the comment about how we have the pole in the foyer that says peace on earth, and how people don't really have access to said higher politicians, and how everybody so articulately explained that government is local. So basically wanted to bring it up. And it started in EDI, where we are now. My personal schedule, my 10-year anniversary is Valentine's Day, so I'm gone for a period of time where the next chance would have been so far in next month where we could talk about it more. So we called this meeting today. We heard you all last 2 weeks ago, and beyond that wanted immediate action, and, so accurately is able to talk about the growing death toll. That's really what this is all about. So we had our first meeting, and then we're having this meeting where there is a draft 2. I'm not sure if anybody has got to read it. I know some people have because they referenced it, but draft 2 is different than draft 1 in the sense that it takes out naming state actors. It doesn't name Hamas. It doesn't name the state of Israel. This ceasefire is supposed to be the best shot that we can to try to preserve life, and that's why it's titled Ceasefire to Preserve Life. I took out October 7th because that is the start of the recent escalation, which we have starting of the death toll. But again, that in itself is I don't know. It was an event that will live in forever, I guess. But at the same time, is it something that the city of Lansing mentions? I'm not sure. That's why we took it off. I'll open it up to council people, and if anybody wants to talk and discuss before we move the resolution.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Thank you just to the committee, but especially thank you to all of you who have dedicated your time and commitment to this resolution. It does not come lightly. This is a very in-depth conversation, so I appreciate all of you that have taken the time to come and speak to us. But not only those who have physically been present, but the countless and numerous emails, phone calls that have been presented to myself and potentially my colleagues here that does not go unnoticed. I will speak personally to myself. Thank you for the additional education. There is countless references that have been received in tons of emails and phone calls. So I thank you for taking that time to present that. I know it doesn't come easy. I know that there is a huge issue that is happening currently, and I don't take that lightly. So again, thank you for this time. Thank you for the chair of drafting this draft, and again, I thank you all for just taking the time to come in, and even previous to my assignment, I definitely appreciate the time that you have taken to come and speak to us. So thank you.
And if I can, before I recognize you, so I guess I edited this. I didn't draft this. I received a 3-page version that had a lot more language, and we edited that. So the draft 2 that you see, I don't want to say necessarily that I drafted it because I didn't. It's mostly community language that we worked on.
Thank you. I want to thank, our committee chair, Councilmember Jackson, for bringing this forward to the committee so we can discuss this proposed draft resolution. As he said, this has gone through a few versions up to this point, and I acknowledge how difficult that can be to craft something with the understanding that not everyone may be satisfied by this. It may not be perfect to everyone, but I know that it has been diligently worked on and revised. And to answer some of the questions that were brought up earlier, as a human, as a mother, and as a representative now of this community, I have been paying attention. I have been listening. I do hear you, and I will speak on behalf of myself. But I dare to say that others on the committee may feel a similar way. So bringing this forward, discussing it, listening to you yet again, I do thank you for your time. You have adjusted your schedules. Many of you have consistently showed up at city council meetings, at special committee meetings, and here we are today. So I do thank you for your time, and I do want you to know that by and large, I have read every email, taken every call on this, had several discussions, and listened to public comment for months. And now that we are here in a position to discuss this, you know, I sit here and I'm listening to the words and your feelings on this matter. Overwhelmingly, I have heard residents push forward for a ceasefire resolution, and in my view, this ceasefire to preserve a life. Innocent lives are being lost, and I hear that. The numbers are growing daily, weekly, monthly, and so, you know, discussing this is of the utmost importance to you as your representatives, to use my voice and my vote in this way to represent you, quite frankly, is you know, part of what we were elected to do, to hear you and take all considerations when making these decisions. So that is all that I have to put forward on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess for the last part of this conversation before we vote would be to talk about the language. I know you all watched the first meeting and read the minutes, or excuse me, talked about it. So there were many suggestions that were valid points that were made, suggesting variations or different, additions. There was a few people, and again, it's easy to say, there was 40 people that spoke in favor and 2 people who didn't, because that's the people who came to the meeting. I'm not saying that, I'm not weighing it necessarily like that, but there were comments that says Hamas needs to be named, and I could understand that. So what I did notice is the state of Israel was named, and we were able to strike that for draft number 2, because I don't think parties necessarily need to be named when we're talking about preserving life, because that's what our resolution is. Now, we know that I don't think that, again, like you said, everybody will be satisfied, and I wouldn't necessarily be satisfied if I was, a Jewish American or Israeli American or a Palestinian American, because of, the strong feelings and historical content. So what we do is have this, and if someone wants to make any offers to make any amendments, you can, or you can move the motion and we can vote on it. Move the resolution to vote.
I move to vote on the resolution calling for a ceasefire to preserve life as presented in draft 2 before us.
That's a proper motion. Any further discussion? And with understanding that if it passes 2 out of 3, then it goes to the committee of the whole. What is 12?
No, this will come out of committee and go straight to council unless you're going to discharge this from here.
Straight to council. What's our date?
Go straight to council. The next day is February 12th.
Okay. This will be on the council agenda February 12th. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Excuse me? Sure. I didn't know if you guys had copies. I guess not, no? Fair enough. All right. I'll just read it as it goes. Whereas the city of Lansing stands committed to the notion that all human life is precious in all communities and nations of the world, regardless of national, ethnic, political, or religious affiliations. And whereas the recent and ongoing armed violence has resulted in the tragic loss of life of thousands of Palestinians and Israeli, and whereas the city of Lansing recognizes itself as a globally connected community enriched by a racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse community that continually stands on the side of human rights, peace, and justice, and has historically welcomed those fleeing violence and war. And whereas Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Israeli bigotry has risen considerably across the U.S. and the world, with direct impacts on our culturally diverse community in Lansing. And whereas critical infrastructure throughout Gaza, including mosques, churches, hospitals, ambulances, and historical cultural heritage sites, were bombed. And whereas Gaza has been effectively cut off from basic life necessities, and most Palestinians have been displaced, resulting in mass starvation and ongoing crisis. And whereas the U.S. government holds great diplomatic power that could save Palestinian and Israeli lives, and the city of Lansing urges officials to prioritize the preservation of life. Now, therefore, be resolved by the city of Lansing, by the City Council of the City of Lansing, that the capital city of Lansing, Michigan, joins the calls from growing numbers of cities across the world for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and Israel, and the safe return of all innocent hostages and detainees. Be it further resolved that the City of Lansing condemns all forms of discrimination, including Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and anti-Palestinian and anti-Israeli bigotry. Be it further resolved that upon passage, a copy of this resolution, I should say, will be sent to the office of the U.S. President, the office of the U.S. Representatives and Senators. Be it finally resolved that the City of Lansing expresses its immense sorrow over the loss of innocent lives and the suffering endured by citizens in Gaza, Israel, and the broader region, and extends its deepest sympathies to Lansing and Michigan residents who have been directly impacted by the ongoing violence in any way, including the loss of loved ones. We have a motion.
Did you want to amend with the word will?
Yeah, that's the second to the last paragraph.
Councilmember Palumbo will have to make the amendment.
Okay.
Because she made the motion.
Okay, I move.
Yeah, just move to amend your motion to include that.
Okay, I move to amend my motion to include the addition of the word will in the second to last paragraph. A copy of this resolution will be sent to the office of U.S. President, the office of the U.S. Representatives and Senators. And I move the resolution.
Thank you. All those in favor of the resolution with the added word, say aye. Aye. Passes 3-0. This will be on the council agenda for February 12th. Is there any other business before the committee?
No.
All right. For our next meeting, which I'm not sure it is, we're going to want to maybe have some ideas of things we want to take up this year. And again, we have a lot of opportunity to do good things, so we can brainstorm that in our time down.
Okay.
We are adjourned at 5 o'clock.
He'll know what to do.